Hey guys, in today's video I want to teach you how to create this pretty simple React app, but I think it covers a lot of key React concepts. So we're going to be using React Router in this app, so to handle our routes. We're also going to be using Redux for state management alongside react-redux. And the API that we're going to be using to get the data is this Poke API. This just returns some data about Pokemon. I've used it in the past and it's quite nice. So this is the home page, and on the home page there's not much going on, but there's a search bar here, so you can search for a specific Pokemon. There's pagination at the bottom alongside obviously all of the specific Pokemon. The pagination itself actually works, so we can go to like the third page or even the last one. And then when we click view on a Pokemon, it shows some extra data about it. I know the API returns more, but I just want to show you guys a couple of just some of the data, and this can be used for anything you want to show. So yeah, and we can just also search for one. So if I do Pikachu, then we get all of Pikachu's data. And if I do, let's say one that doesn't exist, it says that it's unable to get the Pokemon data. So we're also handling errors. Okay, so to get started, let's create our basic React template. So you want to open up your terminal. I'm just using the integrated terminal here. You want to type npx create React app, specify whatever directory you want. We're not going to be using TypeScript in this video. I don't think it's necessary for this. So this will just take a moment and I'll get back to you guys when this is done. Okay, so now that the basic create React app template has been installed, let's add in our own dependencies. So you're going to type npm I or install. And then our dependencies, the first one we're going to use Axios. I also want a Lodash. We're going to want react-redux along with Redux. We're going to want Redux thunk to asynchronously get data using Redux. And I think we should also get Redux DevTools extension. So it's just Axios, Lodash, react-redux, Redux thunk, and then Redux DevTools extension. I always add this in, I find it quite useful, but in case if you guys are using this, make sure not to include it in your production build. So yeah, this will just take a moment. I'll get back to you guys when this is done as well. Okay, so now that all of our dependencies have been added, let's start off by going to our source folder and then opening app.js. So let me close this. So we can remove most of this, and we don't need, actually I'll keep the CSS import, but we don't need the logo. Let's start off by creating our store. So store.js, we're going to import create store. So now our store is going to be a constant create store. So we're going to say a root reducer, which we haven't created yet, but that's fine. Next we want to import compose with DevTools. Also going to want to import apply middleware, and we're also going to want to import thunk from Redux thunk. So now what we can do is compose with DevTools, apply middleware, and then thunk. So now let's create this root reducer. So I'm going to create a new directory called reducers. Inside of there, create a file called root-reducer.js. And we're going to say, we're going to have to import combine reducers from Redux. We're going to say root reducer is equal to combine reducers. And I know I'm going over this quite fast. I do have other videos on this, so I'll leave a link to those. And I'm just going to leave it empty for now. Export default root reducer. Okay, let's import that here. Okay, so now that's fine. Let's actually export this as well. Then if we go to our index.js, I'm going to wrap, actually I'm going to first import provider from react-redux. We're going to say that store is equal to store. So just make sure to import that. Okay, so now let's just start up the project. So in your terminal, type npm run start. This will run the server on localhost. Okay, so it's empty. If we open up our DevTools, and if we go to Redux, it's here, so that means it's working. Normally you'd get some sort of error message if it wasn't configured, so that means everything's working fine. And we can just test this. If we say right test there, I should say yeah. So everything's working fine. Our store has been set up and it's all connected. So let's now get started by just creating some basic routes and handling that. So what we're going to want to do is go back to our index.js. Let's import browser router from, oh, I think this is actually something we forgot to install. So let me do npm I. It was react router DOM. So yeah, that browser router is from react router DOM. So we can just add that in while it's installing. It's going to throw an error, but that's fine. And then what we want to do is wrap the entire app in this. So browser router. And we're going to put those two in here. And yeah, that's fine. So this just that's all of the nested components within the browser router have access to certain props. So now what we're going to do, let's close store and let's close root reducer for now. Let's create a new folder here called containers. And then let's just create two basic containers. So first one's going to be Pokemon list.js, and I'm just going to import React from React and say Pokemon list is equal to, it's just a normal functional component. I'm just going to return a div saying Pokemon list. We're also going to use props. Actually, I don't think we're going to use props for this one. That's fine. Let's just remember to export this. Now we're going to create another file called Pokemon.js. So this is going to be an individual one. And we can actually just copy and paste all of this. Let's change this to Pokemon. So now hopefully it's installed. Yep. So let's just start up our server again. So npm run start. So as you can see, everything's working fine. Okay, so now let's go to our app and we'll add in a navbar in a moment, but just for now, what I want to do is actually set up the routes. So let's import switch and route from react router DOM. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say switch. So this means it's only going to match the first route within here. So we're going to say route. We're going to say path is just, this is just going to be the base path, and I'm going to say exact as well. And the component, let's do, this is the list, so it's going to be Pokemon list. So make sure to import that as well. Let's copy and paste that and say, let's say Pokemon slash, and then here I'm going to say Pokemon again. Now you see, put a semicolon here. That means that this can be, you can think of it like a variable. So this could be anything. So I'll put some comments here. Oops. I'll put some comments here. Let me just minimize this. So it could, for example, if the route was slash Pokemon test, this would actually count as this path here. And if the route was, let's say, anything, then this would also count as this. But if we were to, let's say, do this, then no, this would, none of these two paths would match. So that's what all this is. It means that we can extract this value in it, and this value could also be anything. But I'm choosing to call it Pokemon. So yeah, that's that. Let's also get a couple more things. So I want navlink and I want redirect. So redirect is just going to say to slash. I think that should be fine. So if neither of these two match, it's going to go to this, and all this is going to do is just redirect it back up here. So that way, if we go to an unknown, let's say a 404 page, then it would just redirect back to the base page. So yeah, now you can see we have Pokemon list. If I go, let's say I go to a random one, you can see we get redirected back to the base path. And let's say I go Pokemon slash Bulbasaur. we're actually still on Pokemon list, and oh, that's because I forgot to change this. But now, yeah, now you can see we're on Pokemon. Now, just to show you guys what I mean by this, about how we have this as a variable, if we go to Pokemon and we take a look at the props, so that's console log props. If we open up the console, you can see that props here is an object, and we have a couple of things. So this is given to us because we wrapped our entire app in the browser router. So now you can look through these. So there's some, so let's say, for example, in I think history, there's some functions here. So push is one we're going to be using. So this is to redirect someone to somewhere. Replace is very similar to push, but I think it works a little bit differently in how it stores the memory. So for example, I think if you had to use replace and go back, it wouldn't work the same as if you had to use push and go back. I'm not going to get into detail about that, but what I want to show you guys is if we go to match and we go to params, you can see Pokemon here is Bulbasaur, and that's exactly what we put here. So let's say I go for this test, and we go back to props, match, params, Pokemon is our test. So if we go back to the route here, this is what I mean when I say this is sort of like a variable. This can be anything. Alternatively, if you remember, I showed you guys that if we did this, it would not match any of them. So therefore, because it doesn't match any of them, it goes to the redirect. Hope that makes sense. So now let's just add in a nav bar. So let's say nav. Let's just add in, let's say nav link. Yeah, nav link's fine. So nav link, let's call this search. And all this is gonna have is a 2. I think this was 2 and slash, let's just leave it like this for now and test it out. So if I go to Pokemon and I click search, yeah, it redirects us back there. And alternatively, I could do Pokemon slash test. If I click on this, it should take me to slash test. So yeah, so it accepts a 2. This is actually just an anchor tag if you look at it. And I use navlink because what navlink does is that if you're on this route, then it will have this class called active on it. So if you look here, there's a class active. But if let's say I change back to the base path, it's not active. You can see there's no class active on this link. And so you can just use that for styling. So you can, it might be better for the user experience. So now let's just add some styling on this. So I'm going to give this, let's go to the CSS. I'm going to remove all of this. I'm just going to add in box sizing, border box, and just make sure all of the paragraph tags have no margin and padding. That's just a reset. Now let's say nav, and if you remember, nav just has one anchor inside of it. So let's just do display flex width 100%, justify content flex end. And then I'm going to do nav a, so the anchor tag inside of it, and just say margin right 50 pixels. Also going to give this a height of like 60 pixels, let's say, and then just align the items. So this for vertical alignment, let's say center. So yeah, that's nice. Let's give this a background color. Let's see, what could we do? Let's do something different. Let's do coral. And then we can make the text white. So yeah, I'm just going to remove the underline. So yeah, that's that. So this is for us to go back to the search page, which I think, yeah, let me just change this back. So yeah, this is now going to take us back to the base search page. Okay, so what I want to do now is actually go to the Pokemon list component. And there's not much going on right now, but what I want it to do is when the component first mounts, or when the page first loads, I want it to show the first page of all of the Pokemons. So let's actually go to the Pokemon API. So if I remove the Pokemon name, it actually returns a paginated results. So you kind of, you don't specify the page, but you can specify the per page, so how many results you're getting, and you can also specify the offset, which is how you can do the pagination. So let's go to, let's actually start creating some actions. So I'm going to create a new directory, actions, And let's say Pokemon actions. So the first action that I want is to get this paginated data. So let's say constant, actually let's export this as well. So export const get Pokemon list. And then this is going to have dispatch. Okay. And this dispatch is going to be async. So I want to accept two parameters, so the page and the per page. Actually, we can just hard code the per page. It's quite simple. As you guys see how I do the pagination, you can add it in yourself if you really want. So yeah, let's do a try catch here. So try, and let's also import Axios. So we're going to try to get some data. So response equal to await axios.get, and if I just go back to this and just grab the URL, I'm actually going to use template literals for this. So now if we go into the documentation of this, you'll see, if I go to the pagination, so you'll see that one of the things we can add, if you look up here, is we can change the offset, and we can also add a limit. So that's, the limit is basically your per page, and the offset is how you can, let's say you're on page 2 and you're showing 20, then you'd offset by 40, if that makes sense. So I'll show you guys how to do this. So this is where I'm getting this information from, that we need a limit and an offset. So I'm just going to hard code the limit as 15, and then let's say the page, sorry, not the page, the offset. Yeah, the offset. So we're going to calculate this from the page. So what we can do, and this is going to be equal to offset. So offset is going to be equal to the page multiplied by per page, which we hard coded here as 15. We should probably just do per page 15 and then just do that instead. So yeah, so we can, whoops, we can say per page subtract per page. So that might be a bit confusing. So here's the rationale behind this. So if you're on page 1, your offset is 0. If you're on page 2, your offset would be 15. If you're on page 3, your offset would be 30. So here you can see you can't really see any correlation. But here you can see what we're doing is, I think this is a good example. So 3, we're timesing 15 by 3 and multiplying and subtracting 15. So it would be 3 times 15 and multiply by subtract 15, and that'll be equal to 30. So we do 2 times 15 subtract 15 is equal to 15, and then 1 times 15 minus 15 is equal to 0. So that's how we're going to get the offset. So that's just some simple maths for that. Okay, so now let's handle the catch. We actually aren't dispatching, so let's do that. So dispatch, say type is Pokemon list loading. And then here what we want to do is say Pokemon list, this is the success one, so success. This is going to have a payload, which we can just say payload response.data. And with this final one, we're going to say Pokemon fail. So that should be pretty simple. And yeah, so I go over this in more detail in this other video I have, so I'll put a link to that. But yeah, this should all be working now. Let's now add in the reducer for this. So I'm going to say Pokemon list reducer. Let's create some default state. So we're just going to have loading as false. Actually, yeah, we'll leave loading as false. We'll say data is an empty array. And then we'll say, I think that's it for now. Yep, that should be fine. And then we're going to say const Pokemon list reducer. So we're going to get the state and the action from this. And for now, actually we can do the switch statement now. So switch based off the action type. Let's add in the default, where we're just going to return default. We're just going to return state. And let's say state is equal to default state. Let's also make sure to export this, so Pokemon list reducer. Okay, so now let's add in all three cases. So case 1 is the loading. So I'm just going to return the state. So I'm going to spread it in to create a copy. So I'm going to return the state. I'm going to set loading to true. Okay, so that's that one. We can just copy and paste this. So the next one's loading fail. We'll do that one. And we'll say false. Oh, we should also add in error message. It's going to be an empty string. And say error message is unable to get Pokemon. And then for this one, we're going to say loading is false again. But we're also going to want to add in our data. So we're going to say data is action.payload. And I think that's fine. We don't have to spread this because we're not going to be mutating it. So accessing it by pointer or by reference is better. We don't need to create a copy of this. Oh, and I just realized this should be a success. Okay, so now if I just double check my action, I have Pokemon list. Loading success fail. Loading fail success. Okay, that's fine. And also I'm just gonna set the error message to be empty. And I think I should do the same for this. Okay, so now we're handling this. Let's add this into our root reducer. So I'm gonna say Pokemon list is Pokemon list reducer. Let's then go to our Pokemon list component here. Let's say dispatch is equal to use dispatch. So import that from React-redux. And then I'm going to say Pokemon list is equal to use selector, which is also imported from React-redux, where we get the state. And then I want state dot, this right here, Pokemon list. So it's just going to return everything. Now what I want to do is say, I think let's remove this, and we want to show, so we either want to show loading, an error, or the data. So let's, the way I generally like to do this is I just create a function, so show data. So I'm going to do if Pokemon list dot data. And this is why I got Lodash, because I can check if it's empty. So import Lodash from Lodash. So I can do a check here. So I do Lodash.isEmpty. So if Pokemon list.data is empty, if it's not empty, then I just want to return the data. So I just say, for now, I'm just going to return have data. We'll map through it and I can show it properly later. So yeah. If we don't have data, let's next check if it's loading. So if Pokemon list dot loading, this one's a boolean, so I think it should be a boolean. Yeah, this one's a boolean, so that's fine. We can just leave it like this. So if it's loading, return loading. And if it's if there's an error, actually, yeah, that actually is. So if there's an error, so if Pokemon list dot error message is not equal to an empty string. If you remember, by default in here we set it to an empty string. Then here we're just checking if it's not an empty string, then we want to return this error, whatever it is. So, and we know we only set it to one thing here, we only set it to unable to get Pokemon, but if you have better, more descriptive error messages from your API, then you could easily put that there and just add it to the action and just access it through there. So let's do show data. And remember to call that. So now if we go into our project here and we reload it and we go to the base path. So we're currently not showing anything, and that, oh, that's because we're not dispatching anything. And then we just return, actually leaving this undefined. Actually, no. For now, what we'll do is if it's not empty, if it's not loading, and if there's an error message, then we just return an error message here, unable to get data. I guess let's do a react.useEffect because we want this to run when the component mounts. And let's create a function. And I'm creating this as a function right now, so I'll show you what I mean. So fetch data. And all this is going to do is dispatch get Pokemon list. So make sure to import that from your actions. I know I can just put this directly in here. Oh, and also remember to call it. Let's say page 1. But we are going to use it for pagination. So I'm going to put it like, I'm going to do it like this for now. So later on it's easy. I'm just going to say fetch data page 1. So now if we come here, we get loading and then have data. Oh, and also just realized, remember to add then an empty array of dependencies, so this only runs when the component mounts. So now, yeah, we have data. Oh, it's still, let's just restart that. So localhost, yeah, so we have data. So now let's actually show some of that data. So what we can do is, I'm going to put template literals here. So let's first show the sprite. So let's say, let's call this, actually this is the individual one. So what we're going to do is just show the row. So let's see what data we actually get back first. So if I go back, if I open this, all we get is the name and the URL. And in the URL, they actually give us the ID. I'm not going to use that because I know we can also just use the name instead of the ID here. So yeah, all I really want to show is the name. So let's do, we can actually just change this to a, what we do is return Pokemon list.data.map. And then we get an element, we return a div. Inside this div, we would have a paragraph tag with l.name. So that's the Pokemon name. And I'm also going to have one which, let's just say, yeah, let's leave it like this. Let's just add in an onClick. Oh, actually, no, let's go and grab a link. So this is going to be from react-redux. So link from react-redux. And so what we want to do is when we click on this, we want to redirect to the other page. So we say link to, and this is template literals, so it's going to be slash Pokemon slash and then the name, so l.name. And let's just say view. So we don't have any styling on this. And for some reason, oh, that is because I just remembered that here payload is actually has a couple of things, doesn't just have that. So what we have to do is just make some slight adjustments. So let's say counts. If we look at the API here, we get counts and then we get results. So that's what it's actually under. So let's say count, say 0 initially, and let's do, so data is actually going to be action.player.results, and then let's also set the count to action.payload.count. So now you can see we have all of these here, and When we click on it, we actually go to the link. So that's working. Let's just do a little bit of styling now. So let's first, let me just put this into here. Let's give this a class. So Pokemon item. And this should probably be inside of a bigger one. So let's say list wrapper. And then we just, within the list wrapper, we have all this. So it's still the same, but we just wrap it in a div now. Then what we want to do is list wrapper. We want to, so let's give this a width of 90% and a margin of auto. Let's then do list wrapper. I think we can just do, what did I call this? This is Pokemon item dot Pokemon item. I can just give the same margin of 10 pixels 0. So this is 10 pixel top and bottom and none to the side. I'm going to do a display flex width 100%. I'm going to do justify content space between, so they're on opposite ends. So yeah, just like that. Let's give it a border 1 pixel solid. Let's do coral. And let's actually do 2 pixels. And let's say border radius. Let's just say 7 pixels. And let's also finally add in some padding, just a 10 pixel padding. So yeah, that's how we have all of these now, and they're all nicely laid out. Just gonna also change these anchor tags here. So list wrapper, all of the anchor tags inside of here. I'm just gonna set the color to black and then text decoration none. So yeah, that's fine now. Okay, so I'm going to leave pagination to the end. Instead, next what we're going to do is populate the data that we would get here. So let's start off with the action for that. So this is the get Pokemon list, but now what I want to do is just get Pokemon. So this is an individual Pokemon. We're going to accept the Pokemon name. So it's going to be a string. We'll say async dispatch. And we're gonna do something very similar to this. So I'm actually gonna copy and paste it. Except it's gonna be Pokemon multiple. And there's a reason this is multiple. Because we're actually gonna want to store the data that we get. So that let's say I go to Pikachu first, and then I go to Bulbasaur. And when I go back to Pikachu, we already made the request for that data. So what we can do is just store it in Redux and just grab it there. And in the background do an update to get that new data if it's been updated. So there might be a little bit high level when I say it like this, but I'll show you guys what I mean. So we have our dispatches here. Just going to remove this. We don't need pagination for this. What I'm going to say is slash Pokemon. So we're going to remove all the pagination stuff. So then we have the action payload, and we also here, now we want the Pokemon name. So this is so we know when we're getting the data again, but like let's say we first got the data for Pikachu, we want a name to assign it to. So let's do Pokemon name is just Pokemon. So this is what we get up here. Okay, so that's the basic action for this, quite simple. It's very similar to the first one. We try, so in our try block, we dispatch the loading, try and get the data. If it fails, we dispatch fail. If it succeeds, we send the data in the payload, and we also send the Pokemon name. Okay, so now let's do the reducer for this one. So this one's going to be a little bit different. So let's say Pokemon multiple reducer. So let's create some state, some default state. We want loading. We want data. And I'm actually going to set data to be an object, not an array. And I'll show you guys why that is just in a moment. We also want error message to be an empty string. And I think that's it for the start. So let's next create the actual reducer. So Pokemon multiple reducer, where we get the state. I'm going to default that to the default state and the action. So we're going to do a switch statement based off the action type. Let's do the default one, which is just going to be returning state. And then let's do the first case. So it's Pokemon multiple loading, where we're just going to return state. So let's spread that in. It's going to set loading to true, and then error message to an empty string. So I don't think I explained why we set error message to an empty string, even though it's loading, not error or success. The reason for this is, let's say we go to a Pokemon that doesn't exist, so we get an error. So then this would be populated. But then let's say I now go to one that does exist. This error message will still be populated, and depending on the order that you render this, it could still show that error message. But instead, by showing by setting it to empty and loading, what you do is, because this runs when the component mounts, it's straight away going to be set to empty. So instead it's just going to show loading. So I hope that makes sense. Although you can completely not have to do this if in your show data state, like you see here, we actually check if it's loading first before it checks the error message. If this was the other way around, it would show the error message. So this isn't absolutely necessary, but I do want to still add in. Let's next add in the other two cases. So let's do the fail. And the fail one, we're just going to set loading to false and unable to find Pokemon as the error message. And now the success one, what we're going to do is we're going to set loading to false. So let's do that first. We're also going to now, and then set error message to empty. We're also going to change data. So we're not going to overwrite data. We're going to overwrite part of data. So data is an object, and you have to remember that even nested objects within objects don't get copied even though you do a spread in the higher up object. So that might sound strange. What I mean is, when we copy state here, we do copy all of this, but this object right here is still a reference. It's not actually a copy. So you need to then do another copy of this. There are tools to create deep copies, but I think that's overkill. We don't really need that right now. All we have to do is just create a copy of this. So I'm going to do state.data. So this way we create a deep copy of our state, and we create a deep copy of our data. So yeah, that's that. Then I'm going to say Pokemon name. So square brackets, because this is a variable. So action dot Pokemon name. This is going to be equal to action.payload. So the reason we have it like this is because, let's say I go to Pikachu, then data, so it would look something like this. So it would be Pikachu, and then it would have Pikachu's data here, right? Like abilities and all of that. And then let's say we next go to Bulbasaur. I think that's how you spell it. Then this one would have its own set of abilities. But now let's say we go back to Pikachu. Well, normally you'd have to refetch the data because you would have overwritten it. But here we actually still have it. And all it's going to do is going to show this data straight away. So we don't need a loader. So it's better for the user experience. And in the background, this is still going to run, and it's still going to overwrite this at the end. So that way it is going to show the most recent data, but it's not going to have to show a loader because we've cached some of the old response. So that is the reason for this, why we're spreading in state and instead using the Pokemon name and setting the data that we get from the API to the Pokemon name instead of overwriting data in its entirety. Okay, so I think that should be it for this. Hope I don't miss anything. Let's now go to Pokemon. And let's test this out. So dispatch is going to be equal to use dispatch. And let's say state is going to, let's say Pokemon state is going to be equal to use selector. And then here we're going to get state, and we want state dot, I think it was, oh, we have to actually add this in. So let's say Pokemon, let's just call this one Pokemon, and it's going to be Pokemon multiple Pokemon reducer. So now back in our Pokemon component, we can do state.pokemon, and then yeah, that's all we want. I'm also just going to do is say Pokemon name is equal to props dot, I think it was match dot params dot Pokemon. Let me just test that out. So console log. I don't think we imported this. So let's go here. Let's make sure to export defaults our reducer. And then here, let's import the reducer. Now hopefully, yep, so here we're getting Bulbasaur. Okay, so we're done with the root reducer, we can close that one out. We can also close our index. We should be done with these two, so we can close out our reducers and the actions as well. So now let's go to Pokemon and let's say react.use effect. Remember to put a empty array of dependencies. We're going to dispatch get Pokemon, where the Pokemon is just going to be Pokemon name. So if you remember, this props.match.params is from the URL where we get the Pokemon. So I just put that into a constant for just ease of use. So this would be, for example, Bulbasaur or Pikachu, and we're just putting that into here. So get Pokemon, and then we get it here, and then we can put it into the API to get the data for the relevant Pokemon. Let's just leave it like that for now, and let's go to Redux DevTools, and let's open up our state, our Pokemon, and you can see we have Bulbasaur here. Now let's say I go to another one, you can see we have that one's data here. And then if I go back to Bulbasaur, you can see that all that happens is that this gets overwritten, although you don't actually see it because the data is the same. Okay, so now let's actually show some of that data. So I'm just going to say h1 tag here, and just give this Pokemon name. Let's also create a function called show data, where we're going to, if the Pokemon state, so Pokemon state dot data, and then the Pokemon name. So just to explain what I'm doing here, I'm going Pokemon state, so it's this, data, and then name, so Bulbasaur for example. So I'm just checking if that one is empty, so let's use Lodash for this. So I'm actually going to check if this is not empty, then I want to return have data, just for now. If the Pokemon state dot loading, so if it's loading, then I want to return loading, and if the Pokemon state dot error message is not an empty string, then I just want to return that error message. And then finally, if for some reason others are happening, which I can't actually think of a case where at least one of these won't be true, but we might as well just put this here, error getting Pokemon. Oh, let's also remember to add this in, so show data and call it. So cannot read data of undefined. So for some reason Pokemon state is undefined. Let's just do a console log to see why that is. It might be the name of the root reducer. Oh, yeah. So here I use the capital P, but here I'm using a lowercase p. So if I do this and save, yeah, you can see have data. If I look at the data, this is just the Redux state. So yeah, we have all of this. Okay, that's nice. So let's next just add in let's just actually show some of the data properly. So let's create a div, Pokemon wrapper. Let's first show, let's say item, and then let's first show the sprites. And I know that there are a couple of sprites on the Pokemon, so let me also just do this. Say poke data is equal to, this is just for ease of use. So yeah, so we have that data directly. We don't have to keep referencing it through Pokemon state.data. We can use it straight away from this variable. So the sprites, let's do the image tag where the source is equal to Pokemon data.sprites.front default. So I know that's one of them. And let's just test that out. So yeah, that's there. And I spelled sprites wrong. I know there's a couple other ones. So I know there's front default, there's back default, there's front shiny, and I think there's back shiny. So that's all of them. I know not all of the Pokemon will have this. Here's what I mean by that. I think if I go to this, nope, this has it. But I think some of them don't actually all have images. So just keep that in mind. You might want to do some sort of check if you should actually show the image, because this could be null. So yeah, that's fine for this. Let's create another div. Let's show the stats here. And the stats, if I remember correctly, are an array. So stats, array, base stat, name HP. Okay. So we can just do poke data.stats.map. Let's say elements, and then I'm just going to return a paragraph tag. Let's say l.stat.name and l.stat.base stat, I think it was. I think it's missing the base stat, so it's just, oh, because it's not that. Yeah. So yes, now we have the base stats, and then let's also add in just some abilities. So I know ability is very similar. It's ability, so the top. Yeah, so it has slot. So we'll just take the name. I don't think any of this is too interesting. So yeah, we'll just take the name. Okay, so we have all of this. Let's just do some quick CSS styling. So let's say .poke has a width of 90% and a margin of auto. So that should give some spacing on the sides. Let's say, what did we call this? So this is called Pokemon wrapper. Let's give this a width of 100%, and let's also give this a display of flex. And I think we should do justify content, probably space between. Then for each one, I think we give it a item. So let's do Pokemon wrapper to item. And then in here we can just give it a width of 30%. So hopefully there should be some spacing between them. Looks okay. Obviously could be better, but I'm just trying to get the functionality across to you guys, not the styling. So now we just need to add in two more things, a search bar and some pagination. So for the pagination, we're actually going to be using this component here. So let's start by installing that, and yep, so whoops. So copy this command and let's go to the terminal. Let's stop this and run the command. So just npm install react paginate. So while that's installing in the background, we can actually do the search, because the search is pretty simple. Let's go to the Pokemon list component and let's just add in a search bar up here. So let's create div search wrapper. And this is just going to have, let's say, a paragraph tag, search. Let's also add in an input, and let's also add in a button. Now let's create some state just to handle the search. So search and set search is equal to use state. And initially I just want it to be an empty, just an empty string. And I'm going to say, oh, that's right, search here. And I'm going to say on change set search to the event target value. And then when we click this, what I'm going to do is, let's say on click, I'm going to do props. So let's grab props here. I'm going to do props dot history, I think it was, dot push. And so this is from the React Router DOM package. So push is just going to push them, so go to, like, navigate to whatever directory is here. So let me just use template literals. So it's going to be slash Pokemon slash and then search. So this is from state. Let's also add in a little bit of styling for this. So it's a search wrapper. What I'm going to do is just display flex, width 100%, justify content center, align item center. I think that should be fine. Oh, we stopped our server, so let's start that back up. So we have the search here. Let me just give it some margin. And let me close this. So margin, let's do 20 pixels 0. And now let's test it out. So if I do Pikachu and I hit search, I go to slash Pokemon slash Pikachu and it loads the data when the component mounts. So that's nice. So now let's add in the pagination at the bottom. So if we go to Pokemon, I want to add it, actually sorry, not Pokemon, Pokemon list. I want this to be at the bottom of the page and only to show if we have data. So I'm just going to copy this. And then, so if this is not empty, then what I want to do is actually show that pagination. So the way that we use it is first let's import react paginate from react paginate. And then let's do react paginate here. Now this is going to take some props, and I think it tells us the required props. So we need the page count, so the number of pages. We need the page range display, which is, I think, how many pages to show, and the number of pages to display for margins. So that's just like on the left and right. So let's see on page 5, and if you want to show page 6 and page 4 on the left and right. So let's start with the page count. So this is going to be, so for this we have to actually calculate it. So we know we have Pokemon list, which is Pokemon list state, and this actually contains count. So the total number of rows, total number of items, elements, you could say. Now, if we go to our actions, if you remember, we hard-coded per page to 15. So if you aren't hard-coding this, you might want to have it here, but I am just going to leave it hard-coded. It is pretty simple to change. So let's go back to Pokemon list now. The per page is going to be equal to the total number of results divided by, so the count divided by our per page, and then rounded up because it could be a decimal. So let's do that now. So it's going to be math.ceil, so this rounds up, and the number that we want to round up is the, so it is going to be the Pokemon list, yep, Pokemon list.count divided by 15, and I know 15 because we hard-coded it. So that, yeah, so here there's obviously no styling, but you can see we do get all the pages, and from my own testing I know there is actually 65 pages, so that's working nice. Next up, let's do the other two. So we have page range display. I think I'm just going to set this to 2, and the margin page is displayed, and I'm also going to set that to 2. So hopefully now it looks a little bit, so if I go to this page, oh, so I think if I set this to 1, okay, so this one I'm going to set to 2, and this one I'm going to set to 1. So the page range displayed 2, that is for what is on the left and right of these. So you can see we have 1, oops, we have 4 and 6, and here on the ends we only have 1, and that's because we set margin pages displayed to 1. If we were to change this to 2, we would have, so if I go down a bit, you can see you would have 1 and 2, 64 and 65. So yeah, I'm just going to leave that as this. The only thing that's left is to actually update this. I'll do the styling at the end. So to update this, we have a function on page change. And I'm just going to, so I know it gives you data and data.selected, I think. So if I console log data.selected, and we go back here, open our DevTools. So if I click on this, we get 64. I'm not sure why it does this. It always does one page less. So if I click 62 now, it does 61. I think it counts page 1 as 0 is the reason why. So I'm just going to add 1 to it. So all I'm going to do is call this function, so fetch data. So instead of this, I'm going to call fetch data with the page, but instead just add 1 to it, because my implementation is slightly different to what I think theirs is. So now if I click 3, and you can see the data is changing, the loading state is not changing though, and I think, oh, that's because we actually checked that first, so let's do this instead. So yeah, we get, it's very short, but we do actually get loading. Just a quick note on this. If we go to the Pokemon component, here, I would say that implementing it in this way, where we first check if we have any data, and then if we do, just showing it, even if it's not the most up-to-date, I think this is acceptable, and this is actually something you should do. But here, when you're showing paginated results, and generally from pagination the loading times will probably take longer, then I would actually recommend showing it loading and not loading it from cache, unless you have all of the paginated results in cache. Now that is something I recommend, but it's not something I want to do for this video. So yeah, that's that. Let's now just finish off by just styling this a bit. So I think This doesn't have a class name. I think container class name, let's set this. So let's just check this, yeah, pagination. Okay, so let's just do some styling on that. So let's do a display of flex. Let's give this a width of, let's just give this a max width. Actually, sorry. Let's just give this a width of 500 pixels. I think that's fine. Let's do a margin of auto. Let's also say list style none. Let's say padding 0. See how that looks now. They're all very close together. So to fix that, we can just do a justify content space between. So yeah, now we have the pagination working, and let's go to page 65. So here's the reason why we round up. So if we were to look at this here, so count is 964. So 964 divided by 15 actually gives 64.2. So this rounds up to 65. If we didn't do this, these records here would be missed. So that's the reason why you round up. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this is a pretty long video. I don't know if you guys like the style of video or if you like more shorter ones. But I think this one kind of helps, especially with beginners, just understanding sort of how you want to approach things in React. And I also know that I use a couple of different packages here and how they work together. So we use Redux along with Redux Thunk. We used the React Router. We also just used a fairly, I'm guessing this is a fairly small package just for pagination. So I just want to show you guys also how to integrate packages together. I know normally I only show just individual packages like just Redux or just React Router, but I think this is a nice way to put everything together and create a fairly small, very ugly looking project. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. If you have any criticisms, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, I would also appreciate a comment. So yeah, thanks for watching.